Hey everyone, it's just Frankie-Lou coming to you today from the Grow to Gather homestead. I'm going to be talking to you today about making the most out of your tomato crop, and that really isn't something that Angus finds very exciting. So it's just me because I don't want to torture the boy with tomato talk. He is doing another video with me today about ducklings, so you will see him on that if you're missing seeing Angus. So tomatoes, we're coming to you from the greenhouse today, one of our greenhouses. This is the one that I grow squash, tomatoes, beans, lettuce, and a whole bunch of other companion plants. So I'm going to be focusing right now though on tomatoes. The reason I'm focusing on tomatoes today is because we are in zone 3. We're in the first week of July here, and where I live, that means I basically have 8 weeks left before I'm going to get my first frost probably. I've consistently got frost here at either the very end of August or the very beginning of September. So I want to do everything I can to get my tomatoes up and running and really, really strong and producing tons and tons of fruit before that frost comes, because I can pick all of my green tomatoes, but if I don't even get them to a reasonable size, then it's a waste of my time that I've grown 21 tomato plants and can't do a lot of canning with it. All right, so the number one thing that I do to maximize my growth is I feed my tomatoes really well. We're very, very fortunate here in that we have a ton of compost that we produce with our ducks, and I also water them with dirty duck water. I know that sounds disgusting, but the growth that I see from doing that is great. You probably don't have a lot of access to dirty duck water for probably 90% of you, so I would suggest using a good organic fertilizer while you're going and amending the beds with, or the pots that you're growing your tomatoes in, at least twice a year. Okay, well, twice a season at least. The other thing that I do to maximize my space is I try to grow my tomatoes as vertically as possible. Most of the tomatoes that I grow are indeterminate or vine variety, and that means that they will keep producing until frost, and as long as I keep pulling tomatoes off of them, they'll keep producing. So that's the kind of tomato that I like. I find I get a lot more than I would off of a bush variety, although I do grow a couple little cherry tomato bush varieties because they're very pretty, and it's nice to have lots of little cherry tomatoes at once. So right now I have them started with in between a couple of stakes, but I will actually eventually have them coming and growing up onto hooks that I'm going to hang from down here. Okay, and I will show you a little bit more about that in a second. I have found the best thing to tie my tomatoes to stakes, because I've tried lots of different things, and I've tried spending a lot of money on really expensive, nice soft ties, and they're great, but I don't have a lot of money to spend on that. But I do go through a ton of socks every year. My family goes through a ton of socks every year, and instead of throwing them out, I cut them up and I use these as ties for my tomatoes, because as you can see, there's a lot of stretch, so my tomatoes not going to be damaged by some harsh, by being sort of confined too tightly to the post or whatever it is that I'm tying it to, and they last for the season, right? I just don't throw them out. I don't have to pay for anything, and it's one of those little things I can do in the middle of the winter when I'm just really bummed that I can't be growing. I can be cutting socks up into strips, right? So what I'll do, and I'll show you how I tie that there. Another thing that I do is I prune my tomatoes. Now, I can tell you a quick little story here. I've been growing tomatoes for over 2 decades, and I've always loved a big, beautiful tomato plant. Like, honestly, when they're going, there's nothing prettier than a huge tomato plant. And I always got a decent crop off of it, but not these enormous crops, because I was basically growing beautiful leaves. And yes, they're beautiful, but we don't grow tomatoes for their leaves. You can't eat them, they're poisonous. We grow tomatoes to get big tomatoes. So I was constantly doing this. I continued to grow tomatoes the same way for over 2 decades, And when I worked at a garden center, my boss told me I had to go into the greenhouse and prune tomatoes. I looked at him like he was crazy, and then he showed me what to do. And so I went in and did it, and was really smug when I came home later that night and looked at my big, beautiful plants, and I was thinking, those poor plants at the store. Well, those poor plants that we had at the store produced twice as many tomatoes, looking all straggly and pruned down, than my big, beautiful, gorgeous leafy plants at home. And then also got rid of a lot of other troubles pruning your tomatoes. If you're in a greenhouse, there can be a problem with ventilation and not having enough airflow go through. By pruning away those extra leaves, you're allowing more air to flow through the plants. Another thing is you want to get your pollinators in there. If all they see is leaves, they're not going to come in and dig around in those leaves for the tomatoes. You want to have those flowers really visible to your pollinators. So that is another really key reason to pollinate, well, to prune your tomato plants. Another one is companion plants. I really like to grow my basil with my tomatoes and a whole bunch of other herbs and lettuce. And I even grow garlic and onions and carrots in here as well. If my tomato plants are so bushy, you can't get that, no sunlight comes through, none of those companion plants are going to do well. And those companion plants are there to protect the tomato plant, but they have to, because they help to do things like bring in more pollinators and deter bugs that are not good for tomatoes. But if they don't thrive, how are they helping the tomatoes? So you have to reach a sort of a balance between your tomatoes and the things you're growing with it. So I'm going to take you in. I've pruned 18 tomato plants today, and I'm going to take you in and show you how I do the last two here, and I'm going to do a little tie up for you as well so that you can see one way of working your tomatoes so that they'll grow vertically and you'll get more production out of them. The tomatoes won't be lying on the ground either, which is good. So here we go. Going to take you on in now to... All right. So as you can see, I'm using marigolds as one of my companion plants for my tomatoes. Some lettuce, some lovely basil, and what I've got going on here is a beautiful green zebra plant. Really nice, lots of big leafy leaves, and this is one of my favorites. It produces a nice green tomato. But when I'm done with it, it's going to look a little sad, okay? Because I am going in and I'm going to take off a whole lot of this plant. First thing I'm going to do is, now that it's reached a good 2 feet high, is I'm going to take off a whole bunch of the stuff down at the bottom. You don't really need these bottom leaves. They're just really getting in the way. So you're going to go in there and see this whole thing here. I should have actually pruned this earlier. At the base here, you see this one here? This whole thing has to come off. It's basically producing a whole other plant, and that's going to take a whole lot of energy away from my main stalk. So I'm going to be really ruthless. I'm going to go in, pinch, and snap that off. Okay, took a whole lot of that off. And I'm going to do that again to this one here. Okay, get that off. And then I'm going to take another whole base off here. Okay, so I've taken quite a bit of the plant away at the base. I want to prune at least six inches up onto the plant. Now I'm going to go in, and if you see here, oh, it's kind of hard to get it. There's a leaf, and then there's this little branch, and then there's this little thing growing sort of at the elbow. That's what I want to take off. I want to pinch off all of these little bits at each of the elbows, because that is going to produce suckers, whole other plants. Okay, you just want to basically leave the main plant and its main stems, well, main branches coming up there. Okay, there's a tiny little one here I'm going to get rid of. And then I'm going to leave this plant alone. Now I'm also going to do a little tie for it. As you can see, I've sort of got it balanced between two bamboos here. Okay, so it's kind of impossible for me to do that with one hand, so I'm just going to show you. I've tied it onto the post, and then I've done a nice tie here onto the plant itself. And because it's sock, super flexible, it allows it to grow and move, but it also provides enough support to hold that tomato plant in place. And now what I've done, because I have done this pruning, see there's a nice spot for all of those companion plants to grow well. Okay, so as you can see, I did take quite a bit off that plant, and I will be doing that several more times during the growing season. I also will be continuing to tie that tomato as it grows up. And then I will have a hook come down that I will continue to have it tie, and I'll actually train it to go along these rafters. That's usually what I end up doing. I usually end up with squash coming up this way, tomatoes come down this way, and it's like walking into this amazing archway full of food falling down on me. Now, where I did prune, I've left those plants vulnerable, I'm not gonna lie. Bugs are smelling that now. And there are some that are going to go because it's an injured plant basically, and they are going to be attracted to that. I do put companion plants around that deter bugs, but another thing that I do after pruning is I use diatomaceous earth just as a sprinkling around each of the tomato plants to sort of protect it from anything that might be heading its way. I find that it's very, very helpful because that plant, while it waits to heal, is more vulnerable to attack from insects. So I'm going to put a little of this diatomaceous earth down, sprinkle it around each of these plants to try to just sort of deter some of the critters that are going to come and eat it. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I hope you'll give it a try. I know it feels bad the first time that you do it. You will be rewarded with that beautiful cut tomato leaf smell on your hands, I guess, for all your efforts. And I promise you'll be rewarded at the end of the season, because now your plant is going to have the energy to put towards producing tomatoes for you instead of beautiful green leaves that you can't do anything with except put in the compost. So give it a try. Don't hesitate to ask me any questions in the comments. Please subscribe if you want to see more of what's going on here at the homestead. As I said, we've got duckling videos coming up, we've got bee videos coming up, more planting videos coming up, and some foraging videos as well. So I hope you have a great day. I hope you give some of this a try, and I hope you take this chance to grow together today. Bye.